Well, here we are on a Sunday morning. It's coffee with Cioffi and Rayo, unless you prefer coffee with Rayo and Cioffi, unless you prefer tea. Or
I
the
already had my tea.
You had your tea.
I had my tea already.
Oh, very good. What kind of
And
tea?
well, the usual, Lipton black tea or whatever,
Have
that
you
kind
come to a cosmic understanding of a Lipton flow through tea bag?
of.
Oh boy! So it's a Sunday. It is a beautiful day. There is not a whole lot going on, and hasn't been for quite a while now. So weather pattern looks awfully quiet going forward, and I'll have to at least uh, might as well just state it from the start. Joe, looking out in the long range, there's nothing. I mean, there really is. There's hardly anything you could hang your hat on if you're looking for something from the standpoint of snow here in the I-95 corridor. It's just not there.
Well, the only thing that we could look forward to this week, if you're into snow, is that we have a cold front coming through probably early Thursday, a little ripple in the atmosphere, maybe enough to induce a bit of a drop in the temperature, and may also induce a few showers of rain or maybe a few flakes of wet snow early or during the day on Thursday. And that's about it. And that's just about all I think she wrote for February.
Yeah, and probably even for the first part of March, just kind of looking at back last week, talking about maybe a very small window of opportunity possibly opening up, and only if everything worked out exactly perfectly. And in terms of timing, with these little cold shots that are coming down, the odds were long even under that particular scenario because everything is just so messed up as far as the upper air is concerned. And even there, it looks like to me we go through whatever we go through Tuesday into Thursday, early Thursday, with this next semi-complex weather system. A shot of cold air comes behind it, much like what we saw for Thursday, Friday into early Saturday, early yesterday, and then it just goes out again. It will. The temperatures are going to bounce higher. I just really don't see anything and now, of course, we're almost to March 1st. That's next Sunday. You got at best you have about 10 days to 2 weeks left.
And you know what happens when the first day of the month falls on a Sunday, right? I think I mentioned this before.
Go no, I don't remember what.
If the first day of the month is on a Sunday, you inevitably will have a Friday the 13th in that month.
Oh,
And
we've
indeed,
had a few of those lately, haven't
I'm not
we?
sure. Sorry about that. I need to get up and just
Stretch.
stretch a
Stretching
little.
is important.
Yes. Um, yeah, I don't remember the last Friday the 13th that we had,
Didn't we
but we
have a
have,
couple of them last year?
well, generally in most years we have two. Some years when we have some kind of calendrical oddity, we can have as many as I think four, but this year I think we have just two, and the first one I think comes our way next month. So there you go.
All right. So uh, going forward with respect to today, it's just so nice out. I don't know. I don't know about you, but we will probably maybe do a shorter live stream than usual today, just so that we can get outside in the sunshine. But after a chilly start, it's we're coming up to the 11 o'clock hour here, and an hour before 12 noon, and we already have temperatures up at 50 degrees in and around Long Island and New York City and northern New Jersey. You're in the moving up the Hudson Valley, or mostly in the middle 40s, even a couple of upper 40s showing up. I don't know what is that 55. Uh, Cairo, New York. They must have their thermometer in the sun, because uh, they actually have a temperature of 55 and a dew point of 49, which makes absolutely no sense.
Oh,
Somebody needs to fix those the electronics up there. And down in southern Pennsylvania, southern New Jersey, into Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia, we're in the lower 50s. I thought maybe tomorrow, Joe, and it maybe would be a bit in reverse, because there probably will be a bit more sun in interior southern and southeastern New England that we might actually see temperatures go up close to 60 up that way and stay a little bit cooler as you go south and west.
Would not be surprising. And the question about Tuesday and Wednesday is that I mentioned this on Friday. A lot of forecasts have been saying the temperatures will continue to be in the 50s. Although I tend to think, especially Tuesday, I think we're going to be mired down in the 40s with a lot of cloud cover and a bit of light rain. It'll be kind of a come down as opposed to what we're seeing now. What we may see tomorrow, Tuesday, I think will be kind of a drab day with again. Not any whiteness, but wetness. It looks like
Yeah,
with temperatures mostly in the 40s, but we'll see.
I agree. I went 40s. Maybe South Jersey and places point south might get up to about to 50 or better. But I think for the vast majority of the area that we cover, it's going to be probably in the 40s. And we'll get whatever shot of rain we get Monday night into Tuesday. Then I think we get a break, and then we get another shot of rain later Wednesday into Wednesday night. And then, as you said, after that, it turns colder and dry, and basically drier for the end of the week.
Right, and I would not hang my hat on any snow, but we might see maybe on Thursday a couple of snowflakes in the air as the cold air rushes back in on a gusty northwesterly breeze. But sure doesn't look like much of a chance between now and the end of the month, which will be next Saturday, that we're going to see much in the way of snow. And it looks like this is going to end up being at Central Park the fifth time in 150 years where only a trace of snow has fallen in February. As we mentioned, the only time we've ever had no snow in February was in the El Nino year of 1998, where we had zero, zilch, in terms of snow. So this is one of those years that, well, the snow lovers are not liking, I think, too much.
Well, on that particular stat, here's an interesting one that will be for for Briller Jeopardy. So we're talking about February's being, snowless, and as you just said, this is what the fourth time you said this the fourth or fifth time with
This would be
the.
the if we get through next Saturday without much more than a trace of snow. Well, if we finish the month with a trace of snow, that'll only be the fifth time in 150 years of record keeping.
Okay, so what would you think that number is for the? This is part of Briller Jeopardy this morning. Um, the number of marches that went without measurable snow.
Without, well, zero, no, not even a trace.
Uh, no, 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 trace is fine.
Okay,
Just uh, the number of marches where you didn't get at least point one.
I would say it has to be more than February, and I'll take a guess that. Uh, See, March is a crazy month. I mean, you could have a long stretch of temperatures in the 70s, and then there are long stretches in March where you could have like 15 and 20 inches of snow and big storms. So,
And also, you could have one of those marches where you get a hiccup,
yeah,
late in the month.
I'll I'll say I'll say 20.
Believe it or not, I was actually surprised by this. Four.
Four,
Four.
really?
Only four marches that went without measurable snow. Now, there are probably a whole bunch of them that have trace, but four. So, but you're right about all the variables. And by the way, speaking of snow, just I have the watches and warnings map up now, right now, and we still have a scattering of winter weather advisories up in Colorado, east of 25, and in southern Utah, also a few scatterings in eastern Wyoming, northeast and northwest Montana. And we have in the mountains in the Pacific Northwest winter weather advisories and some winter storm warnings. There's also a small area of flash flood watches up for southern Missouri. And that's it. The rest of the country is bone dry quiet. And as far as snowfall is concerned, just kind of looking out in the west, because that's really where we've seen anything in the last 72 hours. It's all been west of 25 in Colorado, for example, although there's one spot, and I'm not exactly sure what the spot is, northwest of Denver, probably up in the higher elevations, certainly, although everything, higher elevations in Colorado is a relative term. Some 30-inch amounts being reported there, and also In southernmost Colorado, there's another patch of a foot or more. We've got some relatively high snow amounts in Utah, south of Salt Lake City, in Nevada, north of Las Vegas, and in northern Arizona, the Flagstaff area, etc. And not much anywhere else. Just kind of looking around across the U.S. This is 72 hours, folks. So if I just kind of knock off and go to 24 hours on the map, if it will update for me, which it's not behaving itself. But the bottom line is, here's the 24-hour map, and again, it's in the Southwest. So we all know the southwestern quarter of the U.S. is about the only spot that's gotten snow in the last 24 hours. And of course, we always point out the fact that when it snows down there, it's usually not good for snow up here.
Yes, not much to add to that.
No.
I mean, there's still probably snow on the ground in North Carolina from the Thursday night atrocity, but
Well, very little, by the way, because I'm looking at the satellite. I got the satellite loop up, so you should be able to see the snow cover there on the
right.
map, and
Yeah,
looks like
where
it's
did it
almost all gone.
where did it all go?
Yep, all gone. Well, got to 50 yesterday, so it probably disappeared in a big hurry. The loop is showing the firing up of a little bit of moisture that's coming from the southwest and heading up into the Tennessee Valley with clouds, and then of course you can see the little system that's spinning in the southwestern part of the U.S., causing whatever snow is falling there, and then you've got this system on the upper left that's coming into the Pacific Northwest that's going to be bringing more snows to the Northwest and then eventually into the Northern Rockies and parts of the plains as we go through this week. There's an absolute absence, Joe, of major storm activity. It's just been just as I said, just absolutely quiet. The radar's got some rain from northeast Texas through Oklahoma and into Arkansas at the moment. Precip up in northern Colorado, precip in parts of them scattered in New Mexico and Arizona, and then up into the Pacific Northwest. The eastern third of the United States is just absolutely silent from the standpoint of precip today. So, look, if you like sunshine and temperatures in the 50s, outside is where you need to be.
Very much like the early part of April. And I've often said that when it's like this, even in February, that it's great. It'd be a great day instead of being down in Florida. That some of the ball teams, like the Yankees and the Mets, it'd be nice to play a couple of exhibition games up here at Yankee Stadium or City Field. But don't I would not be at all surprised if when it finally does get to the start of the baseball season, that all of a sudden, after waiting the entire winter, that the pattern breaks down and changes, and that we end up with cold and maybe even flaky weather for the early part of April. So
Uh, it,
I don't know
it,
why.
it
I
would
don't know
be
why it's been like that in the back of my mind, but I honestly believe I would not be at all surprised if that happened. Of course, that's a month from now, but it may take that long to see any significant changes in what has been an overall a very bland pattern.
right. I pulled the GFS up from the 6Z run just to show the upper air. The fact that the polar vortex just remains sitting up in the Arctic region. You get these occasional connections that bring down shots of cold air, which we're going to see at the end of this week. And there is actually a little diver system that comes down on the west side of this upper feature at the end of the week, and you can you can pick it out pretty well uh, right in here, moving southeastward. The problem here is the fact that the pivot point is somewhere off the southeast coast, and the system just kind of weakens as it swings eastward. The models we're trying to create some kind of coastal low, well offshore, and of course, you've got this massive fire hose out in the Atlantic that shoots everything out straight to the east. So it's not like anything could come up the east coast anyway. And actually, when you look at the flavor of this, Mr. Rayo, it is again going. I'm a week from now. The main thrust of the Arctic air is still up, locked up. This is what I think is probably the most I find the most astounding is that is the unrelenting nature of this pattern that we're in, and that we got in pretty much at the very beginning of January. It just even in the strongest patterns, you get occasional ripples where the thing tries to break down or relax, but this has just been amazing. It just stays the same. And I've rolled out to day 10, and at this point, going into March 4th and 5th, suddenly the trough is dropping back more in the west than it is in the east. Although it's not um, a complete deep trough down in the western part of the United States, but nonetheless, it's still the same nonsense. And there's nothing there's nothing to me that I'm looking at that says that anything is any different now than it was 2 weeks ago. Even though we had models that have been trying to show a little bit maybe of a disruption, a temporary disruption. Every time the weather models have done that in the long range, they have been absolutely wrong. That to me is amazing.
Right, especially this year with the or this winter with the European. It showed this type of pattern, I think, back in the winter of 2011-12, where it promised you that something big was going to be coming down the road, let's say 6 or 8 days from now, and then when you actually get to that event actually shrivels up or just goes away. And it seems that this year it isn't worth even looking beyond, let's say, 5 or 6 days, because whatever the models have been showing simply, is not going to happen when we finally get there a week or 10 days from now.
I'm just going to show everybody, the polar vortex in the upper atmosphere, way up at 10 millibars, and you'll just see how it just basically sits up uh, over the North Pole, kind of straddles its way closer to Siberia than anything else, and it does it. Not only does it not move, but it doesn't even weaken very much. If this is a time of year where you should start to see this polar vortex actually begin to weaken, and believe it or not. Starting from the middle part of this week, it actually strengthens somewhat as we go through the next 2 weeks. So here's a we're at a point now where we should start to see this thing begin to do the seasonal breakdown that it's supposed to do. It is so wrapped up and so in this tight little ball up in the Arctic region. It shows no sign of doing that. And the last day on the long range, by the way, is March 10th on last night's run. So you've already pretty much wiped out the first 10 days of March.
Right, and it was what, 2 years ago? It was 2 years ago, right about this time, that we began to see the polar vortex split.
Yes, it actually was around the 21st, 22nd.
Hmm.
And 2 weeks after that, we started the bowling alley with the nor'easters. And by the way, uh, along those lines, there's one particular point of conversation that I've noticed coming up, and a few people talking about that type of thing happening again, and the March '93 storm coming up. Let me just put this to bed right off the bat. There ain't nothing that shows anything remotely close to the type of setup you would need to have to produce either one of those situations. It just isn't there. So if you're talking about, if you want to talk about grasping at straws, you're really doing it with both hands and both feet because it just isn't. It just isn't in the cards.
No, we brought this up on Friday, and that winter, the winter that we had the great storm of March '93, that was a winter that was just filled with lots and lots and lots of activity, starting off with the great December '92 nor'easter, and then continuing with a few more robust systems that came through during January and February, and finally climaxing with that big storm in March of '93. And we had not had anything remotely resembling that type of pattern this winter. It looked like, Joe, the beginning of December of this year, when we had that massive snowfall, 22 inches up in Albany, and we had 5, 6, 8, 10 inches here in the immediate tri-state area. it looked like we were kicking off a real active winter, but ever since then, it has been uh, El Bordo,
Yep,
bland, blech.
yep. I have the new GFS up. By the way, weather maps are always courtesy of tropicaltidbits.com, and we are always appreciative that we're permitted to use these things. And here's our low for Monday and Tuesday. Now, of course, here in the Northeast, I think we're going to squeeze out one more reasonable day tomorrow, maybe sunshine and arriving clouds. It'll probably be warmer, as I said, in New England than it will be down in the Mid-Atlantic states. And then, of course, Tuesday, Joe, I think you are right with this. You've got this, this cold high that's trying to build across the top. You've got a low in southern Indiana. The frontal boundary is to the south. There's a little bit of an onshore flow that develops here. So I think temperatures are going to struggle, as you alluded to. Then the warm front sort of struggles through.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but that has been the earmark of this winter is that on more than one occasion, this is going to be like the fourth time this winter where several days in advance you see the warm front and you see that the models are trying to push the warm front through and keep us in a mild airflow.
Hmm.
And last week, if you had followed the numbers, you would say temperatures on Tuesday and Wednesday into the 50s. But again, that's not going to happen Tuesday because I don't think that warm front's getting through here. We'll be stuck in that raw east or east northeast flow, and we'll be stuck on Tuesday with temps in the 40s, which is so hard to accept when you've had a day like yesterday, a day like we're going to have today, and even tomorrow to go back to that dreck, if I may use that term,
Right.
for Tuesday.
You may use that term.
Yeah.
Then, of course, we wait for the upper support to swing in, and that's going to create another low that forms probably later Wednesday into Wednesday night on the point of occlusion, perhaps. And actually, the models do produce a fair amount of precip, mostly rain, through from eastern PA on up into New England. And then, of course, the low strengthens, and now you've got this next cold high coming down to finish off the week. And actually, Joe, the GFS does show a rather robust lake effect event developing Thursday morning in upstate New York and also in northwest Pennsylvania and back around the Great Lakes. Lasting into early Friday morning, kind of dies out a little bit at night, fires up again Friday morning into the early afternoon, and then it's done. And of course, then we go into next weekend, which looks to be a cold and dry weekend. It takes the whole weekend for the high to move to the east. Looks like there's some kind of low that develops well out in the Atlantic that just kind of holds this next cold high in place for a day or so. And then, of course, you can already see the next weather system coming. This is now for Tuesday, March 3rd, into the Southern Rockies. One thing I want to point out, uh, no severe weather. I was looking at SPC's forecast this week, Joe. There's no severe. There's a marginal risk of severe weather today in western Oklahoma and northwest Texas. But after today, there's no severe weather being indicated for not only Monday and Tuesday, but for the rest of the week. So um, I guess we could just say that this relative calmness in the weather. And the other thing I want to point out is when you look at the teleconnections, the PNA, the Pacific North America Index, actually goes sharply negative once we get past March 1st. And usually a negative PNA is a good signal for severe weather developing. And by that, it's certainly seasonal. You start to see some more severe weather activity as you get into the month of March. So this negative Pacific North America Index would point to that for areas in basically in the severe weather belt in the South and in the Midwest. I really don't get too much out of the NAO, which is strongly positive until the very last day when it goes neutral and shows a slight blue line of very small negativity here. I'll bet you that by the time we get closer to that negative NAO is not going to be there. And the East Pacific Oscillation is somewhat positive. Again, very lackluster looking teleconnections, if you want to describe it at best, lackluster. And again, I'm not really seeing. I'm not seeing anything that snow lovers can hang their hats on for one last opportunity.
Yeah, it doesn't look very good. I agree with you. The first 10, right on through the first 10 days of March, it looks like it's the same old story. And I don't know. I just have this feeling that, when we get to April, or even May, by the time we get to May, when it's much too warm for any wintry precipitation for most areas again, that what we're going to be looking at is a situation where everybody will be saying, why couldn't we have this in January or February?
Yeah,
It just, this pattern has to break down eventually, Joe. In fact, you're really pushing the envelope when you have the same type of pattern in place for like 5 or 6 or 7 weeks. That's really pushing the envelope. Usually by then, you start seeing signs of breaking down. It just we've been into this, as you just mentioned, since it seems the beginning of January, maybe even earlier.
yeah.
And it amazes me that we've not even seen any sign, any even minuscule sign of any kind of changes. No blocking, nothing.
Nothing,
It's crazy.
nothing. The NAO hitting record highs, in positive readings of many standard deviations above the mean. You know, fast flows, screaming jet streams running from the across the entire Atlantic. It's been just unrelenting. I've seen patterns lock in for long periods of time, but this is one of those rare times that you're seeing it just have an absolute stranglehold on what's happening. Jason Kaplan has hit the super chat box today, so we appreciate that. Thank you very much, Jason. Maybe next year we'll get more. Listen, you can only go up from here. It's hard to imagine you could get another winter with even less snow in the I-95 corridor than you have right now. William Uber say it's still minus 30 and minus 40 way up in Canada on the north slope of Alaska and eastern Siberia, which is exactly, Bill, where all the cold air is. And Chuck Cardillo, the AO record positive territory with the Atlantic oscillation, everything that you would want in terms of an upper air pattern. Joe, most of the time in the wintertime, you rarely have everything perfectly set up for you. There's always something somewhere in the atmosphere that's not quite the way you would like it to be. But this is one of those instances this winter where you have everything as wrong as you could have it. Okay, everything is in the wrong position and remains in the wrong position.
Right, right.
And
Everything,
Adam
every,
Lowe is already saying that we could write next winter off because we're going to have a strong La Nina, and that's the worst possible option for snow. Adam, I would just say, can we, let's let the spring, summer, and fall play out, and we'll deal with next winter when we get there. Okay.
absolutely,
Uh,
absolutely. Take it one day at a time, so to speak, or one winter at a time.
Right. And I would also argue, by the way, if you're looking at past performance being an indicator of future outcomes, I would just point out that from the standpoint of looking at El Nino and La Nina, there were a lot of folks that were saying, well, we have no El Nino or La Nina, we have La Nada, which should have been good for snow for the eastern part of the United States, or at least better for the eastern part of the United States. And pointing out, because of that, pointing out to other things going on in the North Atlantic and in the Pacific and everything else. And guess what? None of that mattered because of because of the polar vortex being locked up in Canada the way it is. None of that mattered. So I would just be really careful about drawing conclusions with regards to the just simply one indicator in the atmosphere
Correct.
as
And
far
you
as
said
what's going to happen next year. Who
you had said
knows?
you had a chance to look at the numbers at this point before the winter began, or let's say it was, let's say it's last summer, and then you take a look at the temperatures and the snowfall amounts. You say to yourself, well, there must be an El Nino of significance probably developed in the late summer, early fall to lead us into this type of pattern. And you're absolutely right. We had nothing. We didn't have any El Nino. We didn't have any La Nina. It was just a what should have been just a normal year. And in a normal year, you figure out cold spells, warm spells, periods of snow, periods of rain, and we've had none of that. It has been so much tilted toward my. But you know what? Also interesting, Joe. We're talking now just for the I-95 corridor, but places not too far to the west and north
Yeah,
have
they've
had
done
their
very
fair share.
well.
Yeah, they've had their fair share of cold and snow. And a proof of the pudding, as you know, I like watching CBS Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley. They end that show each week with a moment of nature.
Right.
And this particular moment of nature today, they had a national park just south of Rochester, New York, and it looked as wintry as you could possibly imagine. Snow all over the place,
Hmm.
icicles, cold winds, and everything else. He said, "Boy, that really looks winter. Rochester's not too far away from here."
No. Well,
And they
last year you had to go about 40 miles or so north and west of the coast to find, snow of significance. I think this winter you have to go further north. You have to go up closer to I-90
right,
in upstate New York. But yeah, for central and northern New England and for the areas north of I-90, uh, even though the lake effect machine has not been as active this winter as we've seen in some of the more active winters by comparison, but yeah, and of course there's the West. The Colorado Rockies have done well. The Northwest has done well. California not so much, but again, with we spent a lot of the time in mid-January to mid-February with a deep trough in the West, so it's no surprise that you wind up with there. By the way, the chairman Scott Briller points out that these were the years in March where we've had no snow. Okay, 1873, 1894, 1903, and 2012. So,
okay,
oddly enough, from 1903, it was 109 years that we went with uh, uh, at least a trace. 15 times. I would have thought the trace number would have been higher, but it's actually 15 times that there was a trace since
and
1869.
and ever since 2012, at least in the I-95 corridor, at least right here in the tri-state area, March has been really a snow month. We've had quite a bit of snow, lots of big snowfalls in the month of March. Case in point, just last year, the first 3 or 4 days, we had a total of about a foot of snow in the New York tri-state area. It'll be interesting to see how we how this pans out for this upcoming month of March.
Well, yeah, it doesn't
Doesn't look
doesn't
like much
doesn't
has
look.
happened for
No, no. The fat as as uh, the fat lady has definitely sung. Okay. And in fact, whether they call her back on the stage for an encore, just to remind everybody that the fat lady has sung, and I think even someone just pointed out, and I lost who it was. Hang on, let me see if I can find it really quick. But even Dr. Judah Cohen apparently has indicated that the fat lady has sung. So the opera is over, and we just move on, and unless there's a big a hiccup somewhere along the line in the next month, it was Steve Lapointe, I believe, that said that. Um, yeah,
so
there's
based on
nothing here. There's nothing here for me to.
what Dr. Cohen has said now, so does that mean that I should spend this afternoon rolling my snowblower out and getting the siphon and taking out all of the gas so that it doesn't sit there and ferment?
Well, you could always put the gas back in, so why not do that? And by the way, I'm just looking at the new GFS. I mentioned before about that the Pacific North America index going negative after March 1st might open up the door for some severe weather activity in the first week of March. And indeed, I'm just kind of looking at this really fast, and it looks like there's going to be the negative PNA might also favor a more wrapped up lows that are going to try to go to the Great Lakes. So it looks like maybe somewhere around March 3rd, 4th, and 5th, looking at some severe weather issues across the Gulf states, and then on up through the lower and middle Mississippi Valley. Just kind of throwing it out there. It's just an early look. And we don't have the model out far enough. I just want to really fast. I'm not even going to bring this up full screen, but yeah, there's nothing in the upper air that we need to concern ourselves with.
The new GFS has a 992 low passing north of New York City on Wednesday evening. You remember a couple of weeks ago we had a 971 low of all things
Yes.
north of New York City, and in the aftermath of that we had gusty, strong winds, a few snow showers and flurries. This is not as strong as that system, but it looks like on Friday we'll be dealing with gusty winds, maybe a flake in the
Hmm.
cold temperatures, and that's the big thrill of the week.
Yes, it is. Oh, we got Steve Lapointe hitting super chat along with Jason Kaplan. Thank you very much, Steve. Really appreciate it. And you know what? On that note, we're going to just kind of put an end to all this today. It's too nice to be inside, so everybody go outside and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Okay?
Yes, I went up and down my driveway yesterday, and I have a long driveway, Joe. I went up and down my driveway 20 times and managed to put about 8,000 steps on my Fitbit.
Mm-hmm.
We calculated, my wife and I calculated that going up and down my driveway, just to give you an idea of how long it is, up and down my driveway is something like 2.75 miles over.
Wow.
We're doing it 20 times, back and forth, back
Oh,
and forth,
okay.
back and forth. So
Yeah,
I got on
I think
for
I'm going to grab my weights and I'm going to go for a long walk. I like to walk with 8 pound weights and put my do my steps that way.
That reminds me when I was in Long Island, I used to commute and I used to work on an early shift, like 4 o'clock in the morning. I remember driving on Hempstead Turnpike at 4 a.m. and I'd always see the same old guy. I don't know how old he was. He looked like he was in his 60s. Every morning at like 4 a.m. or whatever like that, he'd be on Hempstead Turnpike, just going back and forth. He must have had weights in his hands or something like
Hmm.
that, going back and forth, just walking at 4 o'clock. I said, "You got to be kidding me! You got to be doing something better than at 4 o'clock in the morning than doing this." But uh,
Oh,
so all the best to you with your weights and your walk today.
yep, going to do that. So we'll be back tomorrow night. We'll see you tomorrow night, everybody. Thanks for being here on this Sunday. Enjoy the rest of your day and really get outside today. It's such a beautiful day. You got temperatures getting up into the 50s. Don't waste it by being indoors. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.